Why does everyone see weakness when they should see something else entirely? The 6 a.m. alarm cuts through Fort Bragg like a knife through silence. The ammunition plant wakes up, hydraulic systems hiss, conveyor belts groan to life. Steam gauges whisper their pressure readings into the cold North Carolina morning. The smell hits you first, cordite mixed with machine oil, that metallic taste in the back of your throat. Every ammunition worker knows it, breathes it, lives it. But this morning, something is different. Clara Jensen stands at Quality Control Station 7, clutching her worn clipboard. Her hands shake. They always shake. 52 years old. Gray hair pulled back regulation style. Safety glasses that can't quite hide the lines around her eyes. Lines that tell stories she never speaks about. Her fingers grip that clipboard with an odd precision, like they remember something her body has tried to forget. Get out, dead weight. Sergeant Rodriguez's voice explodes across the production floor. His muscular frame towers over her small figure, his pointing finger aimed like a weapon. 43 personnel suddenly find reasons to slow their work, to watch, to witness what happens when weakness meets authority in a place where strength is currency. Clara says nothing. She just adjusts her grip, those trembling fingers finding their position with a precision that contradicts everything Rodriguez sees. Behind them, the massive autoclave chamber hums. 200 psi. The threshold where one mistake turns buildings into craters. One miscalculation and everyone eats concrete for breakfast. From the elevated observation deck, Colonel Morrison watches through reinforced glass. His weathered face reveals nothing. 30 years of service teaches you when something is about to blow over, or blow up spectacularly. He leans forward slightly, watching Clara's stance. The way her feet position themselves without conscious thought, the subtle shift in her shoulders when Rodriguez gets closer. Something about her doesn't add up. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the explosive materials," Rodriguez continues, his voice carrying that edge of certainty, that tone of someone who has never questioned his right to command. "This is precision work. One slip of those shaky hands and we're all dead." Private Jackson snickers from the detonator testing station, 22 years old, fresh from EOD school. Staff Sergeant Kim allows himself a thin smile. 2 deployments to Afghanistan. He knows what real competence looks like. And this trembling woman with her worn clipboard, she isn't it. But Master Chief Williams sees something different. 30 years in the Navy. He leans forward from his post near the emergency communication panel. Recognition flickers in his eyes. Something about her movement pattern, the way she checks corners, maintains situational awareness. Muscle memory earned in places where such habits meant survival. Clara's badge lanyard tells a story to anyone who looks closely enough. Next to her identification card hangs a challenge coin. Brass surface worn smooth by years of handling. The unit designation too faded to read, but the eagle and crossed cannons are still visible, to those who know what to look for. The morning formation had been routine. 47 personnel assembled at 5:45 hours, breath creating small clouds in the winter air. Rodriguez had announced the day's assignments with that voice of authority. Quality Control Team Alpha will handle administrative reviews. EOD specialists will manage live ordnance testing. We have real bomb techs to handle the dangerous work, so the paper pushers can stick to what they know. The assignment had been clear. Clara Jensen and 7 other quality inspectors would spend their day reviewing documentation, checking serial numbers, safe work, administrative work, the kind of job that keeps civilian contractors out of harm's way while real military professionals handle the serious business of explosives. But Clara hadn't walked to her assigned post. She had moved with purpose, checking corners, maintaining awareness, in a way that spoke of training earned somewhere far from Fort Bragg. "Jensen," Rodriguez's voice stopped her halfway to the administrative section. "Since you're so eager to be useful, let's see if you can handle some basic explosive identification." The EOD testing area occupies the southeast corner of Building C blast-resistant walls, emergency containment systems, concrete thick enough to contain all but catastrophic failures. Rodriguez gestures toward a table covered with military ordnance, practice rounds, training devices, inert explosive samples. Tell me what you see, Inspector, and remember, those shaky hands of yours better not drop anything. Personnel begin to gather, curious, entertained. In the military, witnessing incompetence is sometimes more satisfying than demonstrating competence. Clara approaches with deliberate steps, her trembling hands held carefully at her sides. She studies the ordnance for exactly 15 seconds, her eyes moving in a pattern that suggests she's cataloging not just what she sees, but what she understands. M67 fragmentation grenade. Inert training model, she says quietly, not touching it, just pointing. M18A1 Claymore mine. Practice version with dummy charge. Composition C4 plastic explosive, approximately 4 ounces, stable at current temperature and humidity levels. Rodriguez frowns. The identification is accurate, but that's not the point. Anyone can read labels, old lady. The question is whether you can handle them without getting us all killed. Clara's voice remains steady despite the tremor. Sir, with respect, the humidity level in this room is currently at 68%. Military specifications require controlled storage below 65% for optimal stability of nitrocellulose-based compounds. The observation is correct. Rodriguez knows it. The room's environmental controls have been running high all week, a minor issue the EOD team has been meaning to address. But Clara Jensen is supposed to be a civilian quality inspector, not someone who can recite explosive storage protocols from memory. Lucky guess, Kim mutters, but his tone suggests he isn't convinced. Those shaky hands going to drop a detonator when it matters, Rodriguez presses. Maybe you should stick to filing reports where the only thing you can hurt is a paper cut. The gathered crowd grows, 43 personnel now, all watching Clara Jensen's public humiliation, all witnessing what happens when civilian contractors overstep their boundaries. The moral vacuum is complete. No one speaks up. No one questions whether Rodriguez's treatment is justified. They just watch, because watching is easier than intervening. Clara's trembling intensifies, but she doesn't step back, doesn't apologize. She just stands there, clipboard in hand, those damaged nerves betraying her, while 43 witnesses decide that shaking hands equal incompetence, that age equals irrelevance, that civilian status equals inability to understand military operations. But there's something they don't see, something in the way Clara's eyes scan the room one more time, calculating distances, exit routes, load-bearing structures, as if she's preparing for something, as if some part of her knows what's about to happen. And that's when the ground shakes. What happens when the world collapses, and the people who dismissed you are the ones crying for help? The explosion doesn't announce itself. No warning, no alarm, just a deep rumbling that starts somewhere beneath the foundation and rises through concrete and steel and flesh. The massive autoclave chamber, the one reading exactly 200 psi, it ruptures. The sound is apocalyptic, like the earth itself is splitting open. Steam and pressure and superheated metal turn the southeast corner of Building C into chaos. The blast-resistant walls that were supposed to contain failures, they fail. Concrete slabs shift. Support beams scream. The ceiling begins its slow-motion descent toward the floor. Clara moves before the debris stops falling. Not toward the exit, toward the collapse. Her trembling hands suddenly steady as adrenaline overrides damaged nerves. She drops the clipboard, grabs her safety helmet, and runs into the destruction while everyone else runs away. Rodriguez, she shouts, Kim, Jackson, anyone sound off. Dust fills the air, thick, choking, the kind of dust that gets in your lungs and stays there. Emergency lights flicker. The backup generator kicks in with a grinding whine. Through the haze, Clara can see shapes, bodies, some moving, some not. Private Jackson is pinned under a steel beam, conscious but trapped, his leg bent at an angle that promises complications, his young face twisted in pain and confusion. He's calling for his mother, 22 years old and calling for his mother, because pain strips away training and leaves only the person underneath. Staff Sergeant Kim lies motionless near the detonator station. Blood pools beneath his head, breathing but not responsive, and Rodriguez is buried beneath a collapsed section of concrete wall, only his upper body visible, his voice weak but alive, calling for help, begging for help, from the same people he dismissed an hour ago. Clara reaches Jackson first. Her hands assess the situation with practiced efficiency. The tremor is still there, but it doesn't matter now, because muscle memory takes over, training earned in places where hesitation meant death. She checks his vitals, pulse strong, airway clear. The leg is bad but manageable. "Listen to me," she says, voice calm, authoritative, the voice of someone who has talked soldiers through worse. "You're going to be fine. The beam isn't crushing anything vital. We need to stabilize it before we move you. Understand?" Jackson stares at her. This is the civilian contractor with shaky hands. The dead weight Rodriguez wanted gone. But her voice, her movements, they belong to someone else entirely. Someone who knows exactly what to do when the world falls apart. "Who are you?" Jackson whispers. Clara doesn't answer. She's already moving to Kim, checking his head wound, feeling for skull fractures, her trembling fingers somehow finding the precision needed for triage. She rolls him into recovery position, checks his breathing again. Then she's moving toward Rodriguez, toward the man who called her useless 90 minutes ago. He's conscious, barely, trapped under 800 pounds of reinforced concrete. The wall section has pinned his lower body. His face is pale, shock setting in. He sees Clara approach and something like hope flickers in his eyes, then recognition, then shame. "Help me," he says, not an order, a plea. Clara kneels beside him, her shaking hands pressing against the concrete, feeling for structural integrity, calculating weight distribution, load-bearing stress. Mathematics she learned in schools that don't exist on any civilian resume. "The concrete is fractured," she says quietly. "Unstable. If we lift it wrong, it shifts. If it shifts, it crushes you. If it crushes you, you die." Rodriguez's eyes widen. The bluntness is shocking, but Clara isn't trying to scare him. She's assessing, planning, running through scenarios in her mind with the speed of someone who has done this before, under fire, under pressure, when lives depended on getting it right the first time because there wouldn't be a second chance. "I need tools," she says, not asking, statting. "Hydraulic jacks, cribbing, stabilization struts, and I need them now." From somewhere in the dust and darkness, Master Chief Williams appears. He's carrying equipment, moving with purpose. He doesn't question Clara, doesn't ask why a civilian contractor is giving orders. He just follows them. Because 30 years in the Navy teaches you to recognize competence when you see it. "Master Chief," Clara says, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We need to establish a stable lifting point here," she points. "Secondary support here," another point, "and a safety barrier in case the structure collapses." Williams nods, sets up the equipment, his movements synchronized with Clara's instructions as if they've worked together before, as if they share a language that doesn't require explanation, the language of people who have faced catastrophe and learned to speak in solutions rather than panic. Rodriguez watches them work, his pain momentarily forgotten in the realization that the woman he dismissed, the civilian contractor with shaky hands, she's orchestrating his rescue with expertise that doesn't come from filing reports. His rescue team isn't the EOD specialist he trained. It's a 52-year-old woman whose hands shake, and a Navy veteran who recognizes something in her that Rodriguez completely missed. Clara positions the hydraulic jack, her trembling fingers somehow finding purchase on the controls. "On my mark," she says. "We lift 3 inches, no more. If it shifts wrong, we stop immediately. Understand?" Williams nods. Rodriguez can only watch, helpless, dependent on the competence of someone he judged incompetent. The irony isn't lost on him, but this isn't the time for reflection. This is the time for survival. "Mark," Clara says. The jack engages. The concrete groans, lifts, 3 inches, exactly 3 inches. Clara's eyes never leave the structural fractures, watching for any sign of catastrophic failure, any indication that this rescue is about to become a recovery. "Hold," she says, then to Williams, cribbing now. They work together, placing wooden blocks beneath the lifted section, creating stable support, building a structure that can hold the weight while they figure out how to extract Rodriguez without crushing him. It's delicate work, the kind that requires steady hands and clear judgment. Clara's hands aren't steady, but her judgment is flawless. Every placement, every calculation, every decision made with the confidence of someone who has done this dozens of times, hundreds of times, in places where the enemy wasn't just concrete and physics, but bullets and IEDs and hostile fire. Rodriguez watches her face, really looks at her for the first time, past the gray hair and the safety glasses and the trembling hands. He sees something else: focus, determination, the kind of calm that comes from facing worse and surviving, the kind of experience that doesn't come from quality control. It comes from combat, from missions that don't make it into official reports, from service that leaves scars deeper than anyone can see. "Who are you?" he whispers. The same question Jackson asked, but different now, because Rodriguez is beginning to understand that Clara Jensen isn't what she seems, that her weakness is a mask for something he completely failed to recognize. Clara doesn't answer. She's already moving to the next step, calculating the next lift, the next support, the next decision that will determine whether Rodriguez goes home to his family or becomes another name on a memorial wall. But somewhere in the dust and darkness and chaos, Rodriguez hears her voice, quiet, certain, unshaken by his pain or his fear or his earlier dismissal of her worth. "Hold on, Sergeant," she says. "I've got you." And somehow, impossibly, he believes her. Have you ever wondered what someone is capable of when survival depends on skills everyone assumed they didn't have? The rescue operation takes precision, not just physical strength, not just courage, but the kind of technical expertise that comes from years of working with explosives and collapsed structures and the thin margin between controlled demolition and catastrophic failure. Clara moves around Rodriguez's trapped body like a surgeon, each movement deliberate, each decision calculated. Master Chief Williams positions another jack on the opposite side of the concrete slab. The weight distribution is critical. Lift one side too high and the whole thing shifts wrong and Rodriguez dies. It's that simple, that unforgiving. Clara knows this. Williams knows this. Even Rodriguez, through his pain and shock, knows this. "We're going to lift again," Clara says, her voice that same steady authority. 4 inches this time. Watch the fracture lines. If they start to propagate, we stop. Everyone clear. Williams nods. Rodriguez tries to nod, but pain lances through his chest. Broken ribs, maybe internal injuries. Clara sees it, sees everything. Her years of training and experience distilled into this moment, into this rescue, into proving that competence doesn't announce itself. It simply performs. "Mark." The jacks engage simultaneously. The concrete lifts. Clara's eyes track every micro-movement, every stress fracture, every indication of structural failure. 4 inches, the slab rises. Williams slides more cribbing underneath, building support, creating safety, one block at a time. Rodriguez's breathing becomes easier as the weight lifts off his chest. Not free yet, but closer. Hope mingles with shame in his eyes. Hope that he'll survive. Shame that his survival depends on someone he degraded. someone he publicly humiliated, someone whose competence he completely failed to recognize. Private Jackson calls out from his trapped position. Is he going to make it? Clara doesn't turn, doesn't break focus. Everyone's making it, she says, simple, direct, the kind of certainty that soldiers need to hear when everything has gone wrong. We don't leave people behind. The phrase hangs in the air, significant because it's not just a statement, it's a code. The kind of code that military personnel live by, die by, recognize instantly. Williams catches it. His eyes widen slightly. Recognition dawning, but he says nothing, just continues working, following Clara's instructions with the kind of trust that only comes from recognizing a fellow professional. Next lift, Clara says, 6 inches. This is the critical one. If the structure is going to fail, it fails now. Rodriguez feels fear claw at his chest. 6 inches means freedom, or death, nothing in between. He watches Clara's trembling hands position the jack controls, those same hands he mocked, those same hands that might be the last thing he sees if this goes wrong. Wait, he says, voice hoarse. Before you lift, I need to say something. Clara pauses, looks at him, really looks at him, and in that moment Rodriguez sees what he should have seen hours ago. Competence, experience, strength that has nothing to do with steady hands and everything to do with steady judgment. I was wrong, he says, simple words, inadequate words, about you, about everything. Clara's expression doesn't change. Save it, Sergeant, we're not done yet. She turns back to the jacks, but Rodriguez sees something flicker in her eyes, not forgiveness, not acceptance, just acknowledgement that apologies can wait until survival is certain, because that's what real professionals do. They prioritize the mission over personal feelings. They save the talking for after the crisis passes. On my mark, Clara says, final lift, everyone ready. The tension is electric. This is it. The moment where either Rodriguez walks away or doesn't, where Clara's expertise either saves him or fails him, where everyone watching learns whether civilian contractors with shaky hands have any business making life-or-death decisions. Mark. The jacks lift, 6 inches, the concrete groans, fractures propagate along the sides, dust falls from above. The whole structure trembles on the edge of collapse. Clara's hands don't waver on the controls. Her eyes track every movement, every shift, every indication of failure. And the concrete holds. Williams moves fast, slides cribbing, builds support, creates stability. The structure settles, stops groaning. The imminent collapse averted by inches, by calculations made in split seconds by a woman whose hands shake but whose mind remains absolutely clear. Extraction, Clara says. Master Chief, you pull, I'll monitor the structure, slow and steady. If anything shifts, we stop immediately. Rodriguez feels hands grip his shoulders. Williams, strong, steady, pulling him out from under the concrete tomb that almost became his grave. Inch by inch, foot by foot, his lower body emerges, battered, bruised, probably fractured, but alive, whole, breathing air that tastes like concrete dust and second chances. He's free. Clara immediately moves to assess his injuries, her trembling fingers checking for broken bones, internal bleeding, spinal damage, the kind of thorough trauma assessment that doesn't come from first aid certification. It comes from treating combat casualties in the field, from making triage decisions when the nearest hospital is hours away and every second counts. Pelvis is intact, she says, more to herself than anyone else. Possible fractures in lower extremities, no obvious internal bleeding, vitals stable. She looks at Williams. We need medical evac, now. Williams is already on the radio, calling for help, but he watches Clara work, sees the way her hands find their precision despite the tremor, the way she moves with economy of motion, the way she assesses and adapts with speed that only comes from repetition, from experience, from training that goes far beyond what any civilian contractor would need. Medical personnel arrive within minutes. Paramedics, emergency response teams. They swarm the collapsed area with equipment and expertise, but they defer to Clara, follow her triage assessments, trust her judgments about who needs immediate attention and who can wait, because even without understanding who she is, they recognize competence when they see it. Jackson is extracted next, his leg stabilized, pain managed. He looks at Clara as they load him onto the stretcher. "Thank you," he says, and there's something more in his eyes than gratitude. There's wonder, the kind of wonder that comes from having your assumptions shattered, from learning that the person you dismissed might be the person who saves you. Kim regains consciousness as they prepare to move him, confused, disoriented, but alive. Clara checks his pupils, tests his responses, determines that the head injury is serious but manageable, that he'll recover, that everyone will recover, because she did what she was trained to do, what she spent years perfecting in situations far more hostile than a collapsed ammunition plant. Colonel Morrison arrives as the last casualties are being evacuated. He surveys the damage, the collapsed walls, the destroyed equipment, the testament to how close they came to losing multiple personnel. Then he sees Clara, standing amid the rubble, covered in dust, hands still shaking, but eyes clear, focused, showing no sign of the trauma she just prevented. "Master Sergeant Jensen," he says quietly, using her rank, the rank that doesn't appear on any civilian contractor badge, the rank she earned through 8 years of classified service in places where EOD meant the difference between soldiers coming home and soldiers not coming home at all. Clara turns to him, and for the first time since the explosion, her professional mask slips, just slightly, enough to show the exhaustion underneath, the weight of responsibility, the cost of keeping skills sharp that she hoped never to use again. "Sir," she says, just that one word, but it carries everything: recognition, acknowledgement, the understanding that her secret is no longer secret, that her civilian disguise has been stripped away by necessity, by crisis, by the simple reality that when lives are on the line, training reveals itself no matter how deeply buried. Morrison nods. "We need to talk, but first get yourself checked out. That's an order." Clara almost smiles, almost, because orders are familiar, comfortable, the language of a life she thought she'd left behind. But she follows Morrison to the medical tent, allows the paramedics to check her vitals, clean her wounds, treat the minor injuries she sustained during the rescue, all while Rodriguez watches from his own stretcher, watches and begins to understand just how badly he misjudged the trembling woman with the worn clipboard. Williams approaches Rodriguez while the medical teams work. The Master Chief's expression is unreadable, but his voice carries weight when he speaks. "You know who she is now." Rodriguez shakes his head, afraid of the answer, afraid of how much worse his earlier treatment looks in light of what he's learned. "Master Sergeant Clara Jensen," Williams says. 8 years EOD, multiple deployments, specialized in structural assessment and ordnance disposal under hostile fire. One of the best technical operators in her field. Took shrapnel saving her unit during her final tour. Medical retirement with full honors. And you called her dead weight. The words hit Rodriguez harder than the concrete did. Because they're true, all of it. Every judgment he made, every dismissal, every casual cruelty. All directed at someone whose service and sacrifice exceeded anything he'd accomplished in his entire career. "I didn't know," Rodriguez says weakly, knowing how pathetic it sounds, how inadequate. "You didn't ask," Williams replies, not cruel, just honest. "You saw shaking hands and assumed weakness. You saw civilian contractor and assumed incompetence. You saw a woman over 50 and assumed she had nothing to offer. You never asked who she was, what she'd done, why she was here. You just judged, and nearly died because of it." The truth is brutal, unavoidable. Rodriguez lies on the stretcher and feels the full weight of his assumptions crushing him more completely than the concrete ever did. Because the concrete was an accident. His judgment was a choice a choice to see what he expected rather than what was actually there. Clara returns from the medical tent, cleaned up but still dusty, still showing signs of the ordeal, but moving with that same purposeful economy that Williams recognized, that Morrison saw, that Rodriguez completely missed until it saved his life. She approaches Rodriguez's stretcher, stands there for a moment, looking down at the man who called her useless, who wanted her gone, who made her mourning a public humiliation, and Rodriguez braces himself for what she might say, what judgment she might render, what condemnation he deserves. But Clara just nods, once, a simple acknowledgement, then turns and walks away, no lecture, no recriminations, no making him feel smaller than he already does, because that's not who she is, that's not what real professionals do. They save the mission, save the people, and let the rest speak for itself. Rodriguez watches her go, and understands that dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why do we only see people clearly after they've proven everything we refuse to believe? The aftermath of the collapse brings bureaucracy, investigations, incident reports, safety reviews, all the machinery of military administration grinding into motion to determine what went wrong, how it went wrong, who was responsible. Colonel Morrison's office becomes the center of operations. Personnel cycled through for interviews, equipment examined for failures, procedures reviewed for weaknesses. But everyone knows the real story. The story that doesn't fit neatly into incident reports. The story about a civilian contractor with shaking hands who saved 3 lives using skills that weren't supposed to exist. That story spreads through Fort Bragg faster than any official communication. Growing, changing, becoming legend even as the facts remain stubbornly unchanged. Clara sits in the waiting area outside Morrison's office, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that's gone cold. The tremor is worse now, adrenaline depleted, nerves exposed, the price of using damaged systems beyond their designed capacity. She drinks the coffee anyway, not for warmth, not for caffeine, just for something to do with her hands besides let them shake. Rodriguez emerges from Morrison's office on crutches, fractured pelvis, broken ribs, contusions and lacerations that will heal but leave scars. He sees Clara, pauses, the apology he tried to give during the rescue still unspoken, still inadequate, but necessary nonetheless. Master Sergeant, he begins, using her proper rank, the rank she never claimed, never displayed, never used as a shield against his treatment. Clara looks up, her eyes tired. Sergeant Rodriguez, how are you feeling? It's a simple question, professional, the kind of thing medical personnel ask, but it's also generous, because Clara is giving him an opening, a chance to have a conversation that isn't about blame or shame or the crushing weight of being saved by someone you despised. Like I should be dead, Rodriguez says honestly, and like I owe you my life, and like that's the least of what I owe you. Clara sets down her coffee. You don't owe me anything, Sergeant. I did my job, that's all. But Rodriguez shakes his head, winces at the pain the movement causes. No, you did my job, the job I was supposed to be trained for, the job I was supposed to be expert in. And you did it better than anyone on my team could have, while I was trapped under concrete because I was too arrogant to ensure proper safety protocols. The admission costs him, Clara can see it, the way his jaw tightens, the way shame colors his words, but he continues, because some things need to be said regardless of cost. This morning I called you dead weight, I mocked your hands, I questioned your competence, I publicly humiliated you in front of 43 witnesses, and when I needed help when I was dying under that concrete, you saved me anyway. Why? Clara is quiet for a long moment, her trembling hands finding their rest position. The question deserves a real answer, not a platitude, not a deflection, the truth. Because that's what we do, she says finally. We save people, even people who don't deserve it, even people who treat us badly, even people who would never do the same for us. We save them because the mission isn't about us. It's about them, about getting everyone home. That's the job, that's always been the job. Rodriguez feels tears prick his eyes, unexpected, unwelcome, but unstoppable, because Clara's answer reveals the depth of service he never understood, the kind of commitment that transcends personal feelings, personal grievances, personal anything, the kind of dedication that makes someone run toward danger instead of away from it, toward people who mock them, toward missions that offer no recognition, toward service that asks everything and promises nothing. "I'm sorry," he says, and means it, more than he's meant anything in years. Clara nods, accepting the apology without making it easier. "I know. Is there anything I can do, anything to make this right?" "Learn from it," Clara says simply. "Teach others. Don't let my service be wasted by keeping the lessons to yourself. That's all I ask." Rodriguez nods, then continues into the medical waiting area, leaving Clara with her cold coffee and her shaking hands and the weight of recognition she never wanted. Because that's the thing about heroism. It's public, it's permanent. It changes how people see you, how they treat you, how they expect you to be. And Clara just wanted to be left alone. Morrison calls her into his office an hour later. The space is utilitarian, maps on the walls, commendations in frames, the accumulated evidence of a career spent in service. He gestures to a chair. Clara sits, her posture automatic, military bearing that years of civilian work couldn't completely erase. "Master Sergeant Jensen," Morrison begins, "I've been reviewing your personnel file, the classified version." Clara says nothing, just waits, because she knows what's coming. The questions, the scrutiny, the inevitable complications that come with having her military background exposed. 8 years EOD, Morrison continues. 63 confirmed ordnance disposals, 12 structural collapses stabilized under hostile fire, 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and a medical retirement with full honors after taking shrapnel saving your unit in Helmand Province. He pauses. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Sir, with respect, I did tell. My application included my full service record. But civilian contractor positions don't require disclosure of classified missions, only relevant experience. I listed my EOD certification, my structural engineering background, my safety training, everything required for the position." Morrison frowns. "But you let them treat you like an incompetent civilian." "Sir, what I let them do and what they chose to do are different things. I showed up, did my job, maintained professional standards. If they chose to see weakness instead of competence, that's their failure of judgment, not mine." The response is precise, accurate, and reveals more about Clara's character than any commendation ever could. She doesn't need validation from people who won't see what's in front of them. She just does her job, serves her mission, and lets her work speak for itself. "The problem," Morrison says carefully, "is that your work just saved 3 lives, and now everyone knows. Your secret is out, Master Sergeant. The question is what we do about it." Clara's trembling intensifies. This is what she feared, what she tried to avoid by taking a civilian position. The expectations, the pressure, the inevitable requests to serve beyond her physical capacity, because damaged nerves don't heal, shrapnel wounds don't disappear, and military service doesn't care about limitations when missions need expertise. "Sir, I prefer to remain in civilian status. The position allows me to contribute without the physical demands that my injuries make impossible. I can review documentation, assess procedures, provide technical consultation, but I can't deploy, can't handle sustained stress on my nervous system, can't be the operator I was before the injury." Morrison nods slowly, understanding the dilemma. The military needs Clara's expertise, but Clara needs accommodations the military doesn't easily provide. The solution requires creativity, flexibility, the kind of thinking that bureaucracy typically resists. What if I told you we could create a position specifically designed around your capabilities? Chief Safety Advisor. No deployment requirements. No physical stress beyond what you can handle. Just your expertise applied to prevent the kind of accident that happened this morning. Would you consider it? Clara is silent, weighing options, calculating costs. The position would mean recognition, but it would also mean using her experience to save lives, to prevent disasters, to serve in a way that honors her training without exceeding her limitations. Would it be military or civilian? She asks finally. Hybrid, Morrison says. Civilian contractor status with military consulting authority. You maintain your autonomy, but Fort Bragg gets your expertise where it matters most. Everyone wins. It's elegant, practical, the kind of solution that serves the mission while protecting Clara's needs. She considers it for 30 seconds, then nods once. I accept, on the condition that my primary responsibility remains safety, not politics, not advancement, just keeping people alive. Morrison smiles. Master Sergeant, I wouldn't expect anything else. They discuss details, responsibilities, authority, the logistics of creating a position that doesn't quite exist in military structure but serves a critical need. And through it all, Clara's hands shake, but her voice remains steady, her judgment clear, her commitment absolute. Because some things don't change. Nerves can be damaged, bodies can be broken, but service endures, in whatever form it can, with whatever capacity remains, until there's nothing left to give, and even then, especially then, real professionals find a way. Rodriguez watches from the medical waiting area as Clara emerges from Morrison's office. She looks exhausted, drained, but there's something else too. A quiet satisfaction, the look of someone who has found purpose after losing their path, who has discovered that service doesn't end when capability diminishes. It just changes form. He thinks about his own service, his own career, built on competence and confidence, and the assumption that physical ability equals worth. The collapse taught him differently, taught him that strength comes in many forms, that experience matters more than appearance, that judgment should be based on capability, not on what hands do when they're not being used. Clara passes without stopping, without seeking recognition or thanks or anything beyond being allowed to continue her work. And Rodriguez understands finally what he saw during the rescue, what Williams recognized immediately, what Morrison knew from the classified file. Dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And Clara Jensen embodies that truth with every trembling step. Have you ever noticed how the moment you prove yourself is never the moment that defines you? 3 weeks pass. Fort Bragg adapts to its new normal. Building C undergoes reconstruction. Safety protocols are revised. The investigation concludes that mechanical failure combined with inadequate environmental controls created conditions for catastrophic rupture. Rodriguez and his team face reprimands for neglecting humidity regulation, but everyone survives. Careers continue. Life moves forward. Clara settles into her new role as Chief Safety Advisor. Not officially military, not quite civilian, somewhere in between. The hybrid position suits her, allows her to use her expertise without the pressure of full military status. She reviews procedures, identifies risks, recommends changes, and slowly, grudgingly, the personnel at Fort Bragg learn to listen to the woman with shaking hands who saved 3 lives when everyone else stood watching. But recognition brings complications. The story spreads beyond Fort Bragg. Military networks share the tale. Online communities discuss the details. Media outlets pick up fragments. And with each retelling, Clara becomes less person and more symbol, less real and more myth. The narrative simplifies, reduces 8 years of complex service into one moment of dramatic rescue, turns a career of careful, technical expertise into a single act of heroism. Clara hates it. She sits in her new office, reviewing structural engineering reports when Captain Hayes arrives with news she doesn't want. Master Sergeant, there's a ceremony next month. Recognition of your service. Bronze Star presentation. Public acknowledgement of the rescue. Base commander wants you there. Clara doesn't look up from her reports. Tell him I decline. Hayes shifts uncomfortably. Ma'am, it's not really optional. Your service deserves recognition. The people you saved deserve to publicly thank you. The base needs to show it values expertise and experience. The base needs to show it values safety protocols, Clara corrects. Recognition doesn't prevent accidents. Proper procedures do. That's what I care about. That's what should matter. But Hayes isn't wrong. The military runs on ceremony, on public acknowledgement, on the symbolic gestures that reinforce values and inspire service. Clara's rescue embodies those values. Her refusal to accept recognition undermines the very thing the ceremony is designed to accomplish. Master Sergeant, permission to speak freely. Clara finally looks up. Hayes is young, earnest, the kind of officer who believes in the system even when the system fails. She nods. You saved 3 lives, Hayes says. You demonstrated expertise under pressure. You embodied the values we're supposed to represent. And you did it while people were mocking you, dismissing you, treating you like you didn't matter. Don't you think those people need to publicly acknowledge what they failed to see? Don't you think the base needs to learn from this? It's a good argument, logical, principled, but Clara has been here before, received commendations, attended ceremonies, felt the weight of recognition that comes with expectations she can no longer meet. The problem with being publicly honored is that people expect you to stay heroic, to remain the person they imagine you are, to never falter, never fail, never show the limitations that make heroism necessary in the first place. Captain, Clara says quietly, every time someone thanks me for the rescue, they're reminding themselves that they needed rescuing, that they failed, that they misjudged. Public ceremony amplifies that, makes it permanent, creates resentment disguised as gratitude. I don't want that. I just want to do my job. Hayes considers this, understanding dawning. You're protecting them even now. I'm protecting the mission, Clara corrects. Resentful personnel don't follow safety protocols. They rebel against authority they feel judged them unfairly. Better to let the rescue fade into normal work history than to make it a perpetual reminder of their failure. It's wisdom earned through experience, through understanding that military effectiveness depends on cohesion, trust, the kind of working relationships that public shamming destroys even when disguised as honor. But Hayes has orders, and orders don't care about complications. I'll communicate your concerns to the base commander, he says, but prepare yourself. The ceremony is happening, with or without your enthusiasm. After Hayes leaves, Clara returns to her structural reports, but her mind wanders, back to Helmand Province, to the mission that ended her deployment career, the IED that shattered her nervous system, the choice she made to absorb the blast rather than let it hit the soldiers she was protecting, the medal they gave her afterward, the ceremony where they called her heroic while she sat wondering if she'd ever work again. Recognition didn't heal her nerves, didn't restore her capability, didn't change the reality that her career was over. It just made people expect her to be grateful for losing everything that defined her, to smile while they thanked her for sacrifice they couldn't understand, to embody heroism while feeling utterly broken. She doesn't want that again. But the military doesn't ask what you want. It asks what you can give. And recognition is part of what Clara has to give, whether she wants to or not. Rodriguez finds her that evening in the reconstructed EOD testing area. He's off crutches now, walking with a cane, his injuries healing but leaving reminders, physical evidence of how close he came to not walking at all. Master Sergeant, he says, do you have a minute? Clara looks up from the equipment she's inspecting, notes the tension in his posture, the careful way he holds himself. What do you need, Sergeant? I heard about the ceremony, about your reluctance. Did Captain Hayes send you? "No, ma'am, I came on my own, because I think I understand why you don't want it." Clara waits, lets him continue, because Rodriguez has earned the right to speak, earned it by learning, by changing, by becoming someone different than the man who called her dead weight 3 weeks ago. "You don't want to be reminded that you saved us," Rodriguez says, "because every time someone thanks you, you remember that you can't do what you used to do, that the person who took that shrapnel, who saved her unit, she's gone, and what's left doesn't feel heroic, just damaged." It's perceptive, accurate, the kind of insight that only comes from facing your own limitations. Clara's expression softened slightly. "Go on." "But here's the thing," Rodriguez continues. "We need the ceremony, not to honor you, to humble us, to publicly acknowledge that we failed to see what was in front of us, to admit that our judgment was based on prejudice, not competence, to teach everyone watching that assumptions kill, and that respect should be earned by capability, not appearance." Clara is quiet for a long moment, considering, because Rodriguez isn't wrong. The ceremony serves a purpose beyond recognition. It teaches, warns, reminds personnel that competence comes in unexpected forms, that judgment matters, that respect should be based on what people do, not what they look like doing it. "And if I refuse?" Clara asks. "Then we fail to learn," Rodriguez says simply, "and the next person with shaking hands, or age, or some visible difference, they get treated like you were treated, because we never publicly acknowledged our mistake, never made it clear that such judgment isn't acceptable, never forced ourselves to confront what we did wrong." It's the strongest argument yet, the one Clara can't easily dismiss, because she does care about the mission, does care about preventing future mistakes, does care about the soldiers who come after her, who might face the same dismissal, the same casual cruelty, the same failure to be seen for what they actually are. "I'll think about it," she says finally. Rodriguez nods, understands that's all he'll get, but before he leaves he stops, turns back. "Master Sergeant, thank you for saving my life, for teaching me, for being patient with my ignorance. You didn't have to, but you did. That's what real service looks like." After he leaves, Clara sits alone in the testing area, surrounded by the equipment that defines her expertise, the ordnance that speaks to years of training, the tools that represent everything she learned and everything she lost. And she thinks about service, about what it means, what it costs, what it demands even when you have nothing left to give. The ceremony will happen. She'll attend. She'll accept the recognition she doesn't want. She'll stand in front of personnel and let them publicly acknowledge what they failed to see privately, because that's what the mission requires. That's what prevents future failures. That's what service demands. Even when your hands shake, even when your body betrays you, even when recognition feels like judgment, you serve, because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. That's what you'll continue doing until there's nothing left. But there's something else too. Something Rodriguez said that resonates deeper than he probably intended. "We need the ceremony, not to honor you, to humble us." Maybe that's what all recognition is really about, not celebrating the person, but challenging everyone else, forcing them to confront their own failures, their own assumptions, their own need to do better. If the ceremony can do that, if it can prevent even one person from being dismissed because their hands shake or their hair is gray or their body shows damage earned in service, then maybe it's worth it. Maybe that's just another form of mission, another way to serve, another opportunity to protect people who don't even know they need protecting yet. Clara picks up her tablet, pulls up the ceremony details, reads through the schedule, the speeches, the presentations, the public acknowledgement of service that will make her uncomfortable but might make others better, and she accepts it, not for herself, but for every future soldier who will benefit from the lesson her story teaches. Because that's what real professionals do. They don't serve for recognition. They serve despite it. They do what the mission requires regardless of personal cost. They sacrifice comfort for purpose. They endure exposure for the chance to protect others from the same fate. And as Clara closes the tablet and prepares to attend a ceremony she doesn't want for reasons she completely understands, she realizes something important. Dignity doesn't speak. But sometimes dignity has to stand in front of others and let them speak about it. Not for glory, but for guidance. Not for honor, but for prevention. Not for the past, but for the future. And that's a mission worth accepting, even when your hands shake. When does service truly end? Is it when your body fails, when recognition forces you into light, or never? The ceremony takes place on a clear morning in late spring. Fort Bragg assembles its personnel in the main parade ground. Dress uniforms, polished boots, the military precision that makes such events simultaneously impressive and uncomfortable. Clara stands backstage in her civilian clothes, refusing the uniform they offered, refusing to pretend she's something she's no longer qualified to be. Colonel Morrison appears beside her, understanding in his eyes. You don't have to wear the uniform, Master Sergeant. Your service doesn't require symbols to be valid. Then why are we doing this? Clara asks, not defiant, genuinely curious. Because humans need symbols, Morrison replies. They need stories. They need moments that clarify values and inspire behavior. Your rescue is one of those moments, not because it was heroic, but because it reveals truth. That competence exists in unexpected places. That judgment matters. That service continues regardless of recognition. Clara nods slowly, accepting if not agreeing. The music starts. The ceremony begins. Personnel stand at attention as speakers take the podium. First the base commander, then military leadership, each telling versions of the story that simplify Clara into symbol, that reduce 8 years of complex service into one moment of dramatic rescue, that make heroism seem simple when it's anything but. Then Rodriguez speaks, walking to the podium without his cane, still healing but determined. His voice carries across the parade ground with authority earned through humility, through failure acknowledged and lessons learned. 3 weeks ago I almost died, he begins. Not because of the explosion, but because of my judgment. I saw a woman with trembling hands and assumed weakness. I saw civilian contractor status and assumed incompetence. I saw age and assumed irrelevance. I was wrong about all of it, and my failure of judgment nearly cost 3 lives. The assembled personnel shift uncomfortably. This isn't the heroic narrative they expected. This is confession, admission of failure in front of hundreds of witnesses, but Rodriguez continues, unflinching. Master Sergeant Clara Jensen saved my life using expertise I failed to recognize, technical knowledge I dismissed, experience I never bothered to discover. She did this after I publicly humiliated her, after I called her dead weight, after I questioned her right to even be present. She saved me anyway, not because I deserved it, but because that's what professionals do. They serve regardless of recognition, regardless of treatment, regardless of whether the people they save would do the same for them. The silence is profound. Hundreds of personnel confronting their own assumptions, their own failures of judgment, their own moments of dismissing people who deserved respect. Clara stands backstage listening and understands what Rodriguez is doing. He's not honoring her. He's teaching them, using his shame as lesson, his failure as warning, his rescue as proof that judgment matters. Today we honor Master Sergeant Jensen's service, Rodriguez continues. But this ceremony isn't about her. It's about us. About the military we claim to be versus the military we actually are. About the gap between our values and our behavior. About the need to see people for what they can do, not what their bodies betray about limitations we don't understand. He pauses, lets the words settle, then delivers the conclusion that makes Clara's participation worth the discomfort. Let Master Sergeant Jensen's service remind us that competence doesn't announce itself. It simply performs. That dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And that real strength isn't about what your body can do. It's about what you choose to do when everything else has been taken away. The applause is thunderous, but Clara notices something else. Faces in the crowd, personnel wiping tears, others nodding in recognition, a few looking ashamed. The ceremony is working, not as celebration, but as catalyst for reflection, for change, for better judgment moving forward. Clara walks to the podium when called, accepts the Bronze Star presentation, shakes hands with base leadership, poses for photographs that will circulate through military networks, but her mind is elsewhere, on the mission, on the purpose, on the question of whether this recognition serves or merely satisfies. When it's her turn to speak, Clara approaches the microphone, her trembling hands visible to everyone, physical evidence of damage earned through service, of limitations that don't diminish capability, of sacrifice that continues beyond the moment of injury. "I don't need this medal," she begins, blunt, direct, the way she approaches everything. "My service didn't require recognition. It required competence, technical expertise, the ability to make decisions under pressure. Those capabilities don't need medals to be valid. They need application, use, the opportunity to serve regardless of whether anyone is watching." The assembled personnel shift, uncertain where this is going, but Clara continues, building toward something, toward the point that makes this ceremony more than empty recognition. "What I do need is for this base to learn from what happened, to understand that judgment based on appearance rather than capability kills, that assumptions about weakness or age or physical limitations blind you to the expertise standing right in front of you. That respect should be earned by what people do, not what they look like doing it." She pauses, her hands finding their rest position, the tremor visible but no longer shameful, just real, just evidence of service that cost more than most people understand. 3 weeks ago, people saw my shaking hands and decided I was incompetent, irrelevant, dangerous. They were wrong, but here's the thing. They were wrong because they judged without asking, without observing, without giving me the chance to demonstrate capability before rendering verdict. That's the lesson. Not that I'm special, but that judgment requires evidence, requires fairness, requires the humility to admit you might be wrong about what you think you see. The silence is absolute, Clara's words cutting through ceremony and reaching the uncomfortable truth underneath. That Fort Bragg failed. That personnel failed. That system's designed to value competence instead valued appearance. And that failure nearly cost lives. "So take your lesson," Clara concludes. "Honor your dead, value your living, and before you judge the next person with shaking hands or gray hair or visible damage earned in service, ask, observe, give them the chance to prove what they can do, because competence doesn't need your recognition, but your mission needs their competence, and your assumptions about one will destroy the other." She steps back from the microphone. The ceremony concludes, personnel disperse, but something has changed. Clara can feel it. Not gratitude, not celebration, but awareness. The kind of uncomfortable recognition that precedes growth. That forces people to confront their own behavior and decide whether to continue it or change it. Rodriguez approaches as the crowd clears, still healing, still learning. "That was perfect, Master Sergeant." "It was necessary," Clara corrects. "Perfect implies satisfaction. I'm not satisfied, I'm functional. There's a difference." Rodriguez smiles, understanding the distinction, then grows serious. "There's something else, something you should know." He hands her a tablet, the same military-grade device she had the day of the rescue. The screen displays coordinates, a location, a mission request. Clara reads it, her expression unchanging, but Rodriguez sees the calculation in her eyes, the assessment of capability versus requirement, the eternal question of whether damaged soldiers can still serve missions that need their specific expertise. "Operation Desert Memorial," the message reads. "EOD consultation required. Classified ordnance identification, structural assessment, no physical deployment, remote support from CONUS, voluntary, response required within 48 hours." It's clever, offering mission without demanding capability beyond what Clara can provide. Remote consultation, technical expertise, knowledge without physical stress. The kind of service that honors her training while respecting her limitations. You don't have to answer now, Rodriguez says, but the mission needs you, and maybe you need the mission. Clara hands back the tablet. I'll consider it. But they both know she'll accept, because service doesn't end when your body fails. It doesn't end when recognition makes you uncomfortable. It doesn't end when missions change form or capability diminishes. Service continues in whatever way remains possible, using whatever skills survive, contributing whatever value experience provides. Because that's what professionals do. That's what real soldiers understand. That service isn't about glory or recognition or public ceremony. It's about mission, about people, about the simple decision to contribute regardless of whether anyone appreciates it, regardless of whether your body cooperates, regardless of whether the work is visible or valued or even acknowledged. Clara walks away from the ceremony, her shaking hands finding their familiar rhythm, her mind already calculating mission parameters, assessing requirements, determining whether her damaged nervous system can provide the technical consultation requested, not whether she wants to, whether she can, because wanting is irrelevant, capability is what matters, and despite everything, despite the tremor, despite the injury, despite the permanent limitations, Clara still has capability to offer. She stops at the edge of the parade ground, looks back at Fort Bragg, at the buildings being reconstructed, at the personnel returning to their duties, at the military installation that represents everything she served, everything she sacrificed for, everything she continues protecting even when her service goes unrecognized. And she thinks about the question that has followed her since Helmand Province, since the IED, since the medical retirement. When does service truly end? Is it when your body fails, when you can no longer deploy, when medals accumulate but capability diminishes? The answer comes quietly, simply, with the kind of certainty that doesn't need external validation. Service ends when you choose to stop serving, when you decide your limitations exceed your value, when you surrender the mission rather than adapt to circumstances. Until that moment, until that choice, service continues, in whatever form, with whatever capacity, for as long as you can contribute anything at all. Clara Jensen served 8 years in combat zones, 63 ordnance disposals, 12 structural collapses stabilized under fire, 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, 1 medical retirement, and 1 rescue that revealed truth about judgment and dignity and the kind of strength that shaking hands can still provide. But her service didn't end at Fort Bragg. It didn't end with ceremony or recognition or public acknowledgement. It continues, will continue, in consultation rooms and technical assessments and the quiet work of preventing disasters before they happen, in teaching personnel to value competence over appearance, in demonstrating that worth isn't determined by steady hands but by clear judgment. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Sometimes strength isn't about what your body can do. It's about what you choose to do when everything else has been taken away. Sometimes service isn't about recognition, it's about mission. And sometimes the best soldiers are those who understand that real professionals don't need parades to validate their contribution. They just need the opportunity to continue serving, in whatever way remains possible, for as long as capacity exists, until there's nothing left to give. And even then, especially then, they find a way. Because that's what service means. That's what dedication requires. That's what honor demands. Not speeches, not medals, not public ceremony. Just the quiet decision to keep serving, keep contributing, keep protecting people who may never know your name or understand your sacrifice or recognize your worth. That's real service. That's true strength. That's dignity in its purest form. And Clara Jensen embodies all of it with every trembling step.